What's up, gang? Welcome to The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now listen, The Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I say, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. What's up, everybody? Welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh, and I'm flying solo. And today I'm doing a tribute to my good friend, Rick Sapio. Rick, if you're listening, my brother, I love you. I miss you. And this one's for you. So Rick Sapio is a good friend of mine. He passed away on December 18th of this year. And he's anyone that, we're going to put the information in the show notes, but you need to look up this human. He is an amazing human. I'm going to tell you, he's a guy that had a belief around putting an entrepreneur in every home. And he had a strong belief that entrepreneurism could save the world. And I share in that belief with him. And he was the founder of my program at MIT, Gathering of Titans. And I met Rick 8 years ago at Gathering of Titans. And my first night there, when I met him, I walk into the room and it's an Endicott house at MIT. And I go into the back patio, and I hadn't been there in at that point, 2017. I hadn't been there since 2009. So I've been 8 years since I'd been there. And this is like sacred grounds for folks that have been there that will know what I'm talking about. And it's a real amazing place. It's an old mansion, and it's got really cool property. And so I walk up to this table. I don't know anybody. And there's a few guys sitting around the table, and I introduce myself. And Rick's from Hoboken, New Jersey, full Italian. I mean, hardcore Italian guy. And I'm going to be talking about all the things I learned from him. This guy's one of the greater human beings I've met in my life on today's show. But I've been telling people, I said, Rick reminded me he was a cross between Andrew Dice Clay and Buddha. He was a cross between a monk and some ruffian from central New Jersey, northern New Jersey, and just an amazing guy. But he says to me, I tell him my name, he goes, well, what are you, some kind of terrorist? So that was I'm like, who's this freaking guy? Like, no. No, I have a very Middle Eastern name, but that was like literally the first words out of his mouth. And at that point, I was much heavier than I am now. So I think he started making some fat joke or something about me. I was just like, dude, I don't think I've been picked on like this since I was like 12. And I come to find out he's the founder. He was the person curating the event. And he loves to laugh at his own jokes. And he brings all these amazing humans together. And he was, at his eulogy, which unfortunately I missed the funeral, but I went for the viewing, and I went to, we did a celebration of life in Dallas a couple weeks ago. His best friend and one of my mentors, Rand Stagen, who I met through him actually, said that, Rick was a walking contradiction. He's a person that would wake up at 5 a.m, work out, but would eat 3 pieces of cake, and he's a guy that had a pretty hard life, but really had it come together. And really loved a couple of things in life that I think, at least for myself, I learned a lot from him. He loved tradition, and he loved consistency, and he had that same office for almost 30 years, and ate dinner with his family every night, and had a placemat with all his family core values on it, and he was just a student of life, and I really appreciated that about him. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to him about him today is, I think there's so much that we can learn from someone like Rick. He's a person that gave more than he took. And he's a person that really cared about the world being a better place and brought people together to do it. And so I think that there's a couple things that as I start to think about what's important for me in my life. And I want you to start thinking about like, what matters to you? You know, what do you care about? And when it all starts, you know, with anything, it starts with your core values. And I think Rick lived a value-driven life without question. But you know, one of the things I saw with him, and being a pretty complicated person, was that he didn't take himself too seriously. And I think that a lot of times in life we take ourselves probably too seriously, and that creates a lot of conflict for us. And so he's a guy that did big things, pushed himself to the limit. Every time I saw him, he was pushing himself to the limit. And he was always using the language about playing big. You know, what are you going to do to play big? In fact, when I talk about his passing away, it's in the context of him challenging himself. So I'm going to go straight there right now, but I want you to think to yourself right now, like, what are you doing right now to play big? And I've come to the conclusion that there's an element. I was talking with a guest that is going to be, we're going to air his episode in a couple months, Bo Eason, amazing human who I met because of Rick, who ended up playing in the NFL and starring on Broadway. Yesterday I was talking to him, and it's around, you know, challenging ourselves when things are hard, you know, and not just like resting on our laurels. And I think that there's this imagination around, and some people might do it and love it. My business partner says this, that some people, they like to, you know, go drink Mai Tais on the island, and some people like to row to the next island. And I think playing big is around rowing to the next island and having it feel like you're drinking Mai Tais while you're doing it, being in the rugged waters, but it feels like we're laying on the beach because we're not taking the moment seriously. We understand that we're embracing the challenge, and that struggling well, as Ray Dalio says, is what we're doing. And I think that Rick was a living embodiment of that. And so about 2 years ago, I was at MIT, and Rick was going to host for the year, and he wanted to challenge everyone to have their biggest year ever. And he was starting a new business. It was a concierge business for entrepreneurs that were working with investment bankers. And he and I were talking about the idea, and him really wanting to challenge himself to go above and beyond for the year. And in August, I got an email from him, and it said, you know, I prayed to God, very, very religious guy. So I prayed to God to give me a challenge, the biggest challenge I could ever have. And that I wanted to really level up. It was something to that extent. And boy, did he deliver, if it's a he. Boy, did God deliver. And he got diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, death sentence. And it was a gut punch, because the guy was 59 years old. And to hear someone like him have that news, it was, I mean, it shattered, like in some ways, even right now, you know, your belief in like, man, like that's not fair. And the reality is life's not fair. His death is, if I'm going to check the box of life not being fair, it's going to be Rick Sapio dying of pancreatic cancer on December 18th. And it happens every day to so many people, but this is a guy that like had so much more good to do with his life. And he embraced it all in. He went full out. This guy got everyone together to help solve the problem. He said, I'm going to beat pancreatic cancer. Like the most audacious thing to say, how given a death sentence, I'm going to beat pancreatic cancer. Now, Rick, I love him, God bless him, was a bit of a conspiracy theorist. He didn't have a lot of trust in the institutions of you know, the big pharma and you know, a lot of stuff around big government. And and he's like, I'm not doing chemo, because he asked the doctor. He said, like, what's if I do chemotherapy, like what's, you know, we kind of looked at that option, and they're like, yeah, you know, maybe you can, you know, live a few extra months. So I'm not doing that. And he literally went out there and he did every single thing. And I'm not going to go into detail of what he did, but if you could imagine anything and everything, logical or illogical, to try to save his life over the next 16 months. And that's exactly what he did. And it was impressive to see someone go out like that. Whether I would have done it or not, it's a different story, but, or even for yourself, but to see him do that, embrace that challenge in that way was it was in some ways shocking, and in other ways, like, I was like, of course, this is the only way this guy would have gone out. And so when we start thinking about playing big in our lives, I do think that there's an element of this where Dalio says struggling well, where it's where we go into the unknown, we take those chances with high certainty of probably failure, of not getting what we want, and just keep showing up and doing the work. And sometimes things go our way and sometimes they don't. But I do think that when I start to define what playing big is, I think that's what it is. It's living an unapologetic life. Excuse me, I'm getting like emotional right now. So I want you to ask yourself, are you being unapologetic about the risk you're taking? And you can take risk with a lot of preparation, because I don't think it's around taking reckless risk. I think it's around taking prepared risk. And I will say, like, without question, when I think of the life this guy lived, it was a lot of risk, and it was a lot of prepared risk, and it was going big. And sadly, it didn't work out, but you got to respect the approach. And, and so, I love him, man. And I love you, Rick. And you planted that seed for so many people. And at least I can speak for myself. And that's a gift. And so I'm paying it forward right now. Because, it takes seeing something like that happen for some people, at least for me, to know that, like, life is fragile. And, like, you don't know what's going to happen. Rick was praying to be challenged in a way that he never been challenged. And he ended up getting probably something he didn't want. And, I saw him at his 60th birthday a couple months after he was diagnosed, and he told me, he said, I'm scared, and I asked him what I could do to help him. And I'm not going to say what I did, but I went out of my way to try to help him with some things he needed in order to fight the battle he fought. And I'm proud of that, of being able to help a friend when he needed it. But yeah, I think that's the definition of playing big. And so, I think some people, they're not meant to do it, and some people are. And I think listeners of this type of show are meant to play big, and we're meant to get after it. But, that was one of the things that I really learned from him, and that I'm taking with me when I go out there. Because had I talked to him in July of 2023, a month before his diagnosis, I said, hey man, a month from now, this is what's going to happen to you. I think he would have said, I'm going to play it that way. And so, probably with a lot of sadness, because he had a wife and 4 young kids that he's left on this earth to carry on his amazing legacy. But for me, it's been this moment where I'm like, what am I doing to lean into my life, to grow, to struggle well, to play big, and knowing that I might get a diagnosis like that with a day's notice, and so might you. And so I'm in a CEO forum that I've been in for a long time. It'll be the 20th year of me being in it next year. So 19, and this is year 19. My friend Anton Haramis is the leader for the year, and he started talking about this idea of revolution. We have a lot of things happening in the world right now that feel revolutionary, whether you're talking about politically, whether you're talking about technologically, whether you're talking about spiritually. There's a lot going on. And the same could be said of any time, but it feels really poignant right now. And so we started talking about this idea of revolution. And I've talked about this a little bit on past shows. And when he said, Darius, what does revolution mean to you? And it really comes down to this. I said, look, I think that there's a line in the sand in life. And there's two sides to it. Right? And on one side is the game. And when we start talking about playing big, I think that you can play big in the game, you can play big in what I call real life. And the game is business, accomplishment. The game is changing the world in a way that is not around true life. And it matters, but it is a game. And if you do really, really well at it, people might remember you. And a lot of people I've heard people say, I'm living for my legacy. And I'm like, oh, that's the trophy you win at the end of round 1 of the game. And I used to play for that trophy too. And then I had this moment, and I think Rick's death is like really a great example of this, where it's like no one. If I go down the list of business accomplishments he made, and which were a lot, like, they're not that impressive compared to real life. Real life is around one-on-one. Whose lives are you changing? Like directly, not indirectly. Through your actions, through your behavior, through time spent, through the love you give, through the relationships you build, through who you teach directly and maybe indirectly, but really who you touch. And so, by the way, I like both, okay? But what I've learned from this is that, like, our time is limited. And if you're going to play big, you got to challenge yourself, probably on both sides of the fence, because they all talk to each other. Because what ends up happening is, in the game, some people call it the matrix, when I'm out there, building my businesses and trying to make money and trying to win accolades and trying to do vanity metrics and all these good, things that people on the outside looking in say that's good. It forces me to grow as a human. It forces me to level up. And I can take those learnings and bring them back into the real life and back into the real world, back into what really matters. And I can then do what Rick did, which is affect people like me to level up, so that I can play big. And I think that if the world has more of that, and that was really his belief around an entrepreneur every home, is that an entrepreneur can motivate by creating and getting those around them to create. And so I empower you, the listeners of the show, to start thinking about, how are you leveling up to play big, to affect those around you in real life? I'm not talking about just in your business. I want to use the business as the dojo, as our friend Nathaniel Shawkin says, to challenge ourselves to grow, to put ourselves on the line, to take risk, measured, to face loss and overcome it, to grow in ways that feel uncomfortable at times, so that we can become and be reborn as someone new and better over and over and over again, so that we can challenge ourselves to live bigger and bigger, and then bring that into the real life, into the relationships we live, into the people we motivate, into the people that watch us doing this, and feel inspired themselves to then create more themselves. And that right there, that's love. Because, and there's other parts to it too. I know that's not the only definition, but that is a form of love. And that's a love that Rick gave me, and on top of just being just an incredible human. And I'm going to miss him, but I'm going to think about him every day and challenge myself to live big, not just for him, but he's one of those kernels, one of those seeds of growth that are sprouting out of me right now, to do a couple of things. Number one, to appreciate the life that I have. And number two, to know that I will always play big to the bitter end, or to the better end, maybe that's a better way of saying it. so I can become who I'm meant to be, to affect those around me so that they can become who they are meant to be. And that right there is all I can ask for. And I hope you do the same. So with that said, it's kind of an emotional solo for me today, but I just want to say, Rick Sapio, I love you, brother. The world is a better place because of you. And I'm going to miss you. In this dimension, I'm going to miss you. But see you again on the flip side, my friend. Peace out, everybody. Love you.
She's my lover. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on, so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers. And after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.